So, but yeah, so that basically changed the game completely. But he was still kicking our ass. Like they were still super powerful. Point wise or not, um, if I charged my spearman straight into his warriors, odds are my warriors are going to have to run away before I can even kill one of them because his attack will outweigh mine significantly. Um, so what happened eventually was one of our friends, I think it was the one who had the Wood Elf army, learned about a Warhammer thing. I think it was called campaigns, where you have a map of squares, and basically you have one model that represents your entire army. I think you start off your army at like 500 points. So you start off with a small war band, and there's symbolized as this one unit that you move across this map, and every space you land on, or every other space, I don't remember how the rules work exactly. Might not even been playing it right, but basically we played a game like this in middle school too. Is like discovering a new world. So every time you moved to a different square, it was basically a draw of the card to see if something good happened or something bad happened. Chance or you know whatever the other one is in Monopoly. Crap. But so you get you land on a space, you get more points. You spend more points on your army in total. You land on a space, and I don't know if I think you can land on a space that kills a unit or injures your leader. There's rules about leaders. There's this whole table rule about leaders because you can only have one leader per army. So basically, in campaigns, your leader was your main character. He was the one who wasn't interchangeable. If he died, then you're out of the game completely. It was a really fun, cool idea. And there's this whole chart where, depending on your outcome in a battle, you roll the dice, and no, it wasn't even a roll the dice, I don't think. I think if your leader gets killed, actually I don't even think your leader could get killed. If your leader technically gets killed, you roll the dice, and there's a chart in the rules for the campaign where, it's like, if you roll this, then your leader doesn't have a leg. So now his movement's cut to half or something like that. But actually, I'm pretty sure if you rolled like a 1, your leader's dead. Game over. But, so yeah, it was a really cool idea. The only problem with it, as you can probably figure out, was this was all my friends. Wood Elf army, Empire army, my army, and the Chaos army were all playing. So we didn't want to fight the Chaos, but in campaigns you basically had to fight each other. Otherwise you're just moving around a board, having good or bad things happen to your army. It was basically all about the fights, trying to win out. There's other rules, but we skipped it because it was complicated. We just wanted to have fun with it. And we were having fun as it is with those rules as it was. But so we didn't want to fight the Chaos Army. In fact, I'm pretty sure the first person to go up against the Chaos was my friend with the Wood Elf army, and I want to say he was out of the game completely after that fight. I mean, this was after we already knew about turns, and his leader was fine, but he had maybe one unit of soldiers left. Maybe not even that. Maybe like two archers and one dryad or something. And that was it. He was completely out. He's like, what do I do now? And I think regardless of if you win or lose, depending on outcomes, you get more points. But from how badly destroyed he was from that one fight with the Chaos, I'm pretty sure it was the first fight of the entire campaign too, was this skirmish. He didn't have any points to do anything. Maybe put one more archer in, but what's he gonna do now? So immediately the game just lost its fun. It pretty much broke the game because we had this Chaos army in it. And so I was up next. And I don't know. Yeah, I think it was once I realized that I was next. I was pretty much the Chaos's first target in this campaign. So I was like, I'm done with this, And so I flipped through my strategy book, my army book, and you know, try to find anything I could tweak it with. Now, the best thing I could do was with the leader, because with leaders, you could put points into them. When you get a leader, they tell you in the rule book, the army books, that you could spend like 50 points worth of special items on this leader. Or if it's a more powerful leader, like for high elves, it would be called a prince. If I had a prince, I could spend like 100 points of special items. So in the book were a list of special items and how much points they cost. So I was looking at it, you know, feverishly. I'm like, there's gotta be something I can do. And an interesting rule in Warhammer is armor stacks. So if you, it works differently from D&D. If you have, well, it doesn't work anything like D&D actually, but if you have light armor, then basically one step better than having no armor, you basically have what they call 6+ armor, which means if someone's trying to kill you and they roll the dice, they would have to roll less than a 6 to kill one of your units. So, you know, so the higher up the unit, like, you know, if I have special swordsmen, high elf swordsmen, you know, they would have heavy armor, which is 5+, you know, so basically 5 or lower. And there's never anything extreme, you know, you never have a type of armor that gives you like 3+, you know. But what you do is you stack them up. So, in fact, I think spearmen were 5+, yeah. Spearmen have light armor. Elven spearmen have light armor, but since they also carry shields, it gave them a +1 bonus to their armor, so all of a sudden, to kill them, you had to roll less than a... Wait, no, they had light armor, so it was +6. It was 6+, but since they had a shield, now you had to roll less than a 5. So it made it a 5+, not 6+. So, you know, so you see how it kind of stacks. So I learned in the rule books that if a unit is on a mount, that gives them another +1. And then, so I was like, okay, I'll put my leader on a mount, give him heavy armor, so that's 4+ right there, and a shield, that's 3+. You know, that's fucking perfect, you know. And then I looked in the special items page and found that there was a shield that I could afford for my hero that gave you an extra 2+ armor. So you had the shield, there's the 1+, and then with this, and then it gives you the extra 2+. So it's like, so if I have heavy armor, shield, mounted, the extra 2+, that means, and by Warhammer rules, you can't have, you know, a unit that you can't kill or hurt at all. You'd have to roll a 1 to hurt my leader. So I was like, I like those odds. So sure enough, for my campaign army, I made my leader 1+ to hit. And actually, here he is. This is the unit I used, and I gave him a name. I called him Cynath. It's a name from the High Elf Army book. I actually like the name. I don't remember what it means, though. But yeah, that's him. He's mounted. It's a shield and sword. Oh, actually, it didn't even matter anyway, because horses, I think it's only for high elves, but if a horse has barding on it, you know, armor for the horse, it's another +1. But again, that, you know, it wouldn't count because, you know, I can't have, you know, 0 to hit kind of thing. But I'm gonna look it up really quick. So all of a sudden, this was my hero. You know, this was the unit who was going to crush the Chaos Army for me. Just him, you know. I mean, my spearmen, what can I do? You know. Actually, I think there's a special thing for high elves. You can give the spearmen bows and make them archers. But I already tried the archer thing. That was one thing. I tried all kinds of strategies. I tried magic, but again, like I said, whenever I try magic, he would put a wizard in his army too, with a bunch of counter spells. So whenever I tried to throw a spell, he was immediately like, nope, I dispelled it. And I was just like, well, so much for having good magic, right? I tried doing long range to keep anybody out of melee and just volley arrows at these Chaos Warriors. Again, it takes a lot to hurt them, and I didn't have very many archers. You know, what can you do? Oh, here it is. Cynath means in High Elven, chill, death, silence, and loneliness. I think I might have just thought it was a cool name. Maybe I was trying to be badass or something. But, so that was my leader. This was Cynath. One of the other strategies I tried to use against Chaos was, whenever enemy unit charges at you, that's the only way you could get into close hand combat, was you had to declare a charge where your units move at twice their length. And there's special rules like you measure it out, and if they don't reach it in twice their length, what they're charging at, then they stop. Like, I think they stop where they normally would, but all of a sudden you're now closer to the enemy. But that's the only way you can engage in melee. You'd have to charge. Declare a charge. You have to say these guys are charging these guys, measure it, and then move the units depending on what happens. But the reason for that was if someone declared a charge on you on one of your units, you could choose to have them flee. And fleeing usually involved, if they're on foot, you roll a 6-sided die, they move that many inches or whatever. If they're on a horse, they roll 2 6-sided die, they move that, back from where they're facing. So I even had this ridiculously stupid strategy. I don't even think I ever pulled it off, but where you have the middle units, like 1 or 2 units in the middle, have them be the focal point of where he's going with the warriors. The minute he declares a charge, you move them back. You have 2 units on the side, flank them, and the whole time there isn't any combat, you shoot arrows into them. Because I think there's a rule, you couldn't do ranged attacks into units that were in combat with one of your other units. So while this whole back and forth was going on, I'm running away from his charge kind of thing, and my guys are moving in for flanks, just volley arrows at him, get him weak enough, flank from both sides. But again, like, he would have seen that. Like, again, like, he had a cheap army, but he was, he was a good strategist. We played a lot of StarCraft together. But, so this was my new strategy. Just this badass, untouchable, virtually untouchable hero. I even gave him a weapon that made him better at, I think it gave him an extra attack, because I think a regular high elf leader has 2 attacks, so I gave him a 3rd one. Higher my chances, lower his chances, So sure enough, the first thing I do when we start this fight, I charge Cynath right into his warriors. I leave my spearmen. I had spearmen and archers, I think, and that was it, and Cynath. I left my spearmen and archers to deal with whatever he had left. I think he had his marauders or something, and they were nowhere close to as tough to kill. Like, they were fun, actually. It was fun when he had marauders out, because it was finally something we could kill. Some we could actually do significant damage to. It felt good. So I left those 2 units with his, 8 or so, armorless marauders, while my 1 warrior goes against his 12 Chaos Warriors. And sure enough, before those 5 rounds are up, I had maybe 3 deaths, and I had taken out a good, I would say, 3/5 of his Chaos Warriors. Needless to say, I won. Like, tallying up the points, it was ridiculous. In fact, there were rules about, like, point differences. Like, pretty much saying if it's this much of a difference between points, then the other army was decimated, and they take these penalties, kind of thing, And I was close to getting, I didn't get it. I didn't decimate his army by those, rules. But I won. I beat the Chaos Army, and I remember the whole time the fight was going on, my friends, like, all my other friends were just gathered around watching. We'd always, like, group up to play these games, even if it was just 2 of us playing at a time. Like, we'd all, join in to watch and, play whoever's next and stuff like that. And my friends, like, were just hovering around this fight the entire time. We're just like, no way. This isn't happening. What? And yeah, sure enough, I think Cynath took 1 damage, and leaders actually have HP. They have, I think, a high elf leader has 3 HP, so he took 1 damage. And I remember by that point I was sweating. I was like, if he dies, like, that's basically the bulk of my army, or in him. You know, the points were basically all him. But sure enough, he survived, and I completely destroyed the army. Yeah, it was a good day, and you know, the war was finally won with the whole chaos thing. Sadly, though, after that, I think, after the whole campaign debacle, we started playing less and less. We started finding less time. You know, I think senior year in high school is coming up, and everybody's busy during that year. So, but I'll never forget that. Like, just the fact that we had this common enemy, you know, in this game, you know, a simple game with friends. It'd be like a multiplayer video game where whenever you have your friends over, there's just that one friend who always kills all of you, you know, without a problem, and you just all of a sudden, like, that's the fun of the game, is trying to stop that from happening. And so, yeah, I'm glad to say it, you know, finally did. Again, though, I don't mean to discredit my friend who plays as Chaos. He didn't have it easy. Or, I mean, he had it easy, but he was still good at the game. And basically, my example of this is this one game we were playing where I had archers on a hill. Basically, if you have scenery, they place certain rules to it. Like if you place trees, and you know, on the board it's a forest, and if you move through it, like for certain units, wood elves never had a problem with forests, but you'd have to move, you know, less because you're going through forests. If you have ranged units on a hill, it adds to their to hit roll. So you'd always want to put archers on a hill, and that's what I had in this particular fight against Chaos. I had archers on a hill, and you know, usual bullshit was happening. My spearmen were getting whooped by his warriors, etc., etc. But my archers remained fairly untouched. That was until his wolves showed up. Now, his wolves, again, like the marauders, no problem to kill. So I rolled a hit. I see the wolves making their advance on me. So, in fact, I think he declared a charge. And if you charge into ranged units, you can declare to fire at them while they're charging. Like that's one of the rules you have if they're ranged. So this happened. He charged my completely defenseless, at the time, I didn't have any armor on these archers, charged them. So I'm like, okay, I attack then. And so basically, before the wolves even got to me, I killed enough of them where they had to make a psychology test, which they failed, and they had to flee. And I was like, score 1 for the archers. And I'm pretty sure that was like the best I've ever had archers do, because again, against Chaos, even against wood elves, my archers were nothing, because they always became archer against archer, and wood elves archers are better. So I was like, you know, awesome, I completely, you know, I have these wolves fleeing for their lives now. And then my friend was like, who played the Chaos, was like, okay, now roll to see if your men pursue. And I was like, I have to roll for that? Because there's a pursue. If someone flees from battle, I always thought you could choose to pursue. And the fun thing was was if, you know, they roll their 6, their 1 6-sided or 2 6-sided die, you know, move that distance, but then you roll your 1 or 2 6-sided die, go your distance, and if you touch or bypass them, they're gone. Like, the whole unit's destroyed. In fact, we had a really, really messed up fight once where, just because of the circumstances, a unit had to flee. In fact, some units have cause fear, so the minute you come into contact with them, it's a psychology test to see if they'll flee. And so I think it happened once. It might have happened to me, actually, because wood elf dryads had caused fear. So I think it happened once where they had to do their psychology test, lost, and then were pursued and overrun by the Dryads. And none of the fighting had even started yet, and there was that entire unit of men just gone. Like that's the rule. You don't roll for hits or anything. They're all those points are your opponent's now. So I always thought it was a choice, because I mean you have the upper hand at this point, you know, like, oh, I just beat this unit and they're fleeing from me, you know, maybe I'll stand back and, you know, not pursue them, which in the case of my archers, yeah, I don't want to pursue them. I'm on my hill, all nice and comfortable, you know. All the fighting's going down below this hill. I don't want to move my armorless archers who don't do shit melee-wise to get in the middle of that. So I was like, no, I'm not going to pursue them. And he's like, you have to roll your psychology basically to see if you could tell your men not to pursue. And I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding. And so I look in the rule book, and sure enough, it's a rule. If a unit flees, if you decide not to pursue them, you have to roll your psychology. And they explain it in the rule book. It's basically saying, if you can get your men in control enough to say, don't pursue them, you're better off here. You know, you're basically telling children not to run off, you know? And my high elves, you know, very, very sophisticated people, I had to do that with. And the thing about high elves, another thing that are great about high elves is they have high leadership. The highest leadership you can have is a 9, and the only race that has units with a 9 were high elves. Archers are like 8 though, or 7, but that's still pretty high, because when you roll a psychology test, it goes with leadership stat. That leadership is what you roll against. So all I had to do was roll more than an 8. Or less than an 8, yeah. I had to roll less than an 8. And sure enough, I was out of 12. I had to roll less than an 8. And sure enough, I failed. And they pursued right into the fight, where his Chaos Marauders were waiting. And needless to say, his wolves turned out better than my archers at the end of that fight. And I thought, you know, like, that was genius of him. And I later realized, I think I talked to him about it too, I was like, you sent those wolves after me on purpose, didn't you? Because, like, even I was like, well, this is an easy fight. I shoot at them, most of them are going to go down, because wolves are pretty squishy, you know? It might have just been a mutual understanding, because, again, like, that's not something you do, or something he would ever do. Like, again, he, you know... That's genius, though. Like, how else would you keep... Like, how else would you have moved my men off of that hill? Like, you pretty much... Yeah, you pretty much take advantage of the rules. And, yeah, again, I don't want to discredit him, because he was a good player. And it's unfortunate that he decided to have an army that was unbeatable. And he was already a pretty good strategist. So, yeah, that's... So this is my first part, though, for Counter Monkey. It's not D&D, but it is tabletop. The next time I'm going to go into D&D things, more interesting stuff happens later in my life, or actually during and after. But I just want to talk about Warhammer and the war against the chaos, and how eventually it was won by the brave and mighty Cynath. Here's again. So yeah, I hope this was an entertaining video. Sorry if I stumbled around it a bit. I tried to organize it as best I can, because there's a lot to cover, and a lot more popping up in my head as I'm trying to, you know, keep it organized. So alcohol doesn't help. But yeah, take it easy.